Hi everyone! In this video I'm going to show you how to go from this to this eye by implementing 10 very easy tips, and each of these tips is going to help you improve the quality of your art. Make sure to stay tuned until the end because I'm going to share one extra tip which not only applies to drawing eyes but can help you improve all of your drawings. So I'm going to start with the example eye that's not necessarily so perfect on the left side, and I'm going to repeat all the steps on the eye on the right side, but implementing the tips I mentioned to make it look more realistic. As you can see, I already drew the pupil and now I'm starting with the iris. I left the part out that I won't shade, which is going to be the highlight of the eye. Now, eyes are often sort of wet, so they are very reflective and should have one or more bright highlights. I am making this highlight kind of square. It could resemble the reflection of a window or something, and this is something I often notice in eye drawings, that the highlights have very simple shapes, either round or square. So I'm drawing the iris around the highlight, following the direction the lines in the iris usually go in. I'm starting with a base layer, which is an even grey color, and then I'm making the outer part of the iris slightly darker and the inner part slightly green. Irises barely ever have only one color. Though I'm adding variation in color, you can see the colors are evenly distributed around the entire pupil. There's no variation in lightness or color so far. Now I'm going to add some texture to the iris. Irises often have some sort of pattern in them, which can be just stripes, and this is exactly the pattern that's often used when drawing eyes, which is perfectly fine by the way. Now to finish the iris, I make the edges a little darker with a black pencil. Things to improve in the right eye. Draw a highlight with a less simple shape. Don't leave the highlight entirely white. Add variation to both the pattern and the brightness of the iris. So again, I start with shading a light base layer while leaving the highlighted area out. However, the highlight in this iris isn't a simple shape like in the other eye. It's a complex natural shape, like something is actually being reflected in it. You can imagine it being trees or something. When drawing the iris, I make sure to have some variation in lightness. The lower part of the iris is lighter, while the upper parts that are not covered by the highlight are a little darker. Making a sharp edge between the lighter and darker parts can make it look more natural because it amplifies the illusion of a reflection. When I add the pattern to the iris, which are actually the same lines as in the left eye, I make sure that it's irregular rather than perfectly evenly distributed over the surface of the iris. In nature, patterns are often irregular and chaotic. I blend the darker edges of the iris into the lighter parts, so there isn't a hard line on the outside of the iris. And finally, I don't leave the highlight white, but I add some very light shading to it, with slightly darker and slightly lighter parts. So I'm starting with the white of the left eye. I am adding some grey shadows around the edges to make it look like it's curving forward, just like a real eyeball. I use a cool bluish grey and a warmer grey that tends more toward brown, and I'm adding some redness to the corners. As you can see, the white part of the eye is actually quite big. There's a lot of white showing around the iris, and I am blending everything with a white pencil, making sure not to touch the black line of the iris. And finally, I add some little veins. Things to improve in the right eye. Using darker shadows to give the drawing more depth. Blend the outer edges of the iris into the white around it. Draw the veins beneath the top layer to make them look more natural. On the right, I also start adding grey shadows, using the same two tones of grey as I used in the left drawing. However, I add far more color to it, making the white much darker than the white on the left side. I make sure there are dark shadows on the upper part of the white and in the corners. I'm also using the same red color as on the left side, but again I'm going to use much more of it. The white of the eye is never really white. Adding more shadow gives the entire eye more depth. I add the veins before I start blending with a white pencil because that makes them look like they are a little bit beneath the surface. And I also blend the sides of the iris with the white. In real eyes, there's almost never a sharp, crisp separation between the iris and the white of the eye. There's always a thin area around the iris where it blends into the white. In this eye, there's also less of the white visible compared to the left eye. Back to the left eye to draw the pink wet thingy in the corner. Do you know how that's called? I didn't, but I looked it up. It's a plica semilunaris. I am coloring it with pink and dark red, adding some details and that to it. And I add some more redness to the corner of the white. Things to improve in the right eye. Pay attention to the size of the plica semilunaris, it should not be too small. On the right side I also color the plica semilunaris with pink and dark red, but I leave a highlight out. I always pay a lot of attention to the size of the plica semilunaris because I tend to draw it far too small like I did in the left drawing. I sketch it bigger than I think it should be and usually it ends up having the exact right size. It's time to stop working on the eyeball itself and start adding some skin around the eye. I start off with drawing the crease above the eye. I tend to draw this crease too close to the eye, which is exactly what happened here, making it look unnatural. I add shadows to the eyelid, but I'm afraid that it will become too dark, so I guess I'll stop now. Things to improve in the right eye. Make sure there is enough space between the eye and the crease of the eyelid. Add some dark shadows to give it depth. On the right eye, I pay attention to the place where the crease should be. It is important to note that the area where the lashes come out of the skin also takes up some space, so I make sure to keep a proper distance between the crease and the eye itself. Just like with the white of the eye, I pay attention to my shadows. Adding too small or too light shadows make the eye look unnatural, so don't be afraid to add those shadows using red and brown. I do not use a lot of black for the shadows, only for the thin lines inside the creases. So back to the left eye to add some lashes. So making lashes which are perfectly distributed over the eyelid, pointing in the direction the eyelid is going in. On the lower eyelid I also distribute the eyelashes perfectly along the entire eyelid, making sure to keep some space between where the lashes start and the eye, because everybody knows that there's a piece of wet skin between the eye and the lower eyelashes. Duh! Things to improve in the right eye. Make the lashes irregular by varying in size, thickness, direction and distribution. Then back to the right eye, going in with a sharp black pencil. This time I try to make the eyelashes more irregular. Sometimes there's a nasty lash that simply doesn't want to fall in line, no matter how hard you're trying to get it to point in the right direction, and no matter how much mascara you put on it, it simply keeps pointing the wrong way. Okay, it doesn't have to be that dramatic, but the direction should be a little different every now and then. Sometimes two lashes stick together at the top, forming some sort of triangle. Also, they don't always go straight up. Some lashes bend down first before they point up, so some lashes actually cover the upper part of the white of the eye. And they also often show up in the reflection of the eye, by the way. Then finally I'm going to finish both drawings with a waterline. In the left drawing I am adding a thick line because my white gel marker has such a big tip. In the right drawing I also add thick lines, but after they dried I scratch part of them away with a very sharp white pencil. Now there's one more thing I'd like to suggest when you are making eye drawings, or any other drawing for that matter, and that is use a reference image. There is absolutely no shame in using reference images, and it helps to improve your art big time. It is very difficult to know all details of a specific subject by heart. Knowing the basic shapes is often as far as we know things. So looking at reference images and finding all the small details can help to give your art just the realistic touch it needs. I will list my favorite reference website with loads of free to use reference images below in the description. Anyway, that's it for today guys. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.